Here I have a typographic portrait of Pavarotti, which I have created earlier, and as you can see, the entire image is made of text with some slight texture behind, giving an overall clarity to the profile. In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate how you can create a typographic portrait just like this in Adobe Photoshop. To make it easy for you to understand and follow along, I have broken the entire tutorial down into 4 specific stages. Stage 1, preparation. Stage 2, create a type base. Stage 3, type positioning. And stage 4, color blend. If you stick to these steps, you too can create something you will be happy with, and it should not be too difficult. Now, in the description, you will also see I have marked at what point on the timeline each section starts, so if you wish to come back at any time or skip ahead, it will be really easy for you to do so. To follow along with this tutorial, you can download the project folder. This contains all the Photoshop documents and reference images at each stage to guide you through your design. You will also find template documents, which I will be using later in this tutorial, and these are there to help speed up your workflow, so I urge you to download that. All links are in the description. So with all that said, let's get into it. Stage 1, preparation. So before you create your artwork, I advise you to create a project folder on your desktop. In this, make sure you have 3 additional folders called Fonts, Images, and Text. As you can see, I have mine here on the desktop ready to go, and inside I have the folders all ready. So the first thing you will need to do is find a subject. If you want to get the same effect as mine, you will want to find a portrait that is more or less front on, just like Pavarotti here. Once you have your image, save it to your image folder. Next, you will need to find a canvas texture. Now you can either use the sample provided in the download project folder, or you can find your own. Either way, make sure to save this in your image folder. Also, you will need a color image. Now this is going to be the source of color in your design. I have this one here, which is also provided in the downloadable folder, but you might want to find something else. Again, make sure to save this into your image folder. Next, you will need to choose the text you are going to use. For this example, I have chosen to use lyrics from 3 very popular Pavarotti songs. Some other interesting ideas you could consider could be speeches, poems, stories, or monologues. I got this text from the internet and pasted it here into a text document. Once you have acquired your text and pasted it into a text document, be sure to save it into your text folder. Once you have your images and your text ready, it's time to source your fonts. Now, for my example, I have chosen to use what appear to be classic-looking fonts, as this seems to best fit the context of Pavarotti, classical music and opera. But whoever you choose to do your portrait on, you may want to use a different style to fit the subject. To create this composition, I actually used about 45 individual fonts. Now this is entirely up to you how many fonts you do choose to use, but keep in mind, the more fonts you have, the more variety you will get, thus the more interesting your end result will look. I acquired most of the fonts for this example from dafont.com. They have a huge variety of fonts here, and they are all available to download for free. Now it's important to mention that whatever fonts you download for this project, try and keep them all in this fonts folder in your project folder. So if you download any fonts, try and move them out of your downloads folder and into your fonts folder, and you will see why later. When you download the fonts from dafont.com, you will notice they will come down as zip files. So first go ahead and download all the fonts you're interested in and want to use, and you will end up with a folder full of zip files. Once you have all your zip folders in your fonts folder, you will need to unzip them all. Once that is done, go ahead and delete the zip files. After unzipping all your files, you will notice you get some fonts in folders and some fonts as single files. As you can see here, I have a folder with just the font files. I have previously organized them in this way and deleted all the folders and other files I don't need. So you may need to spend a little time organizing your font files until you're simply left with just the font files in your folder like so. So once you have them all organized like this, be sure to select them all and install them onto your computer. Excellent. Now I also used some fonts that were already installed on my computer, so I took a little time to look over my fonts in Photoshop. So the fonts I thought I would use, I wrote a quick list on paper like so. Now this may sound like a lot of work to do, but trust me, this will pay off and will make things so much easier later on. So now you have your images, you have your text, you have your downloaded fonts in a single folder and installed, and a font list. It's time to prepare your text. To prepare your text, you will need to open your text up in a word processor. Now when we come to using the text in the artwork later on, we are going to be pasting in small chunks of text. So to make this easy, I'm going to do a little formatting here in the word processor to prepare it. What I'm going to do is just add line breaks to create small chunks of text. Fortunately for me, I'm using lyrics, so there is not a huge amount of text to work with. Though if you're using a large paragraph, try and add a line break and get on average of about 4 words per line, like so. Though I do recommend you drop in the odd single word. This will be good to break up the text when we come to use it in our artwork. So ideally, you want to format your text so it looks something like this. Once you've prepared your text like so, I need to do one last thing, and that is to prepare the text in Photoshop. So here I am in Photoshop, and I have a pre-prepared template. This is available in the downloadable project folder. So what you see here is 3 columns of text. And if we look in the layers panel, we can see each column is set in its own layer folder. And in each folder, there are individual text layers. If I toggle the visibility of some of the layers, you can see that each line is indeed a single text layer. And you will also notice that the font for each text layer is set to Arial, so it's nice and basic for us to make a start. Now I have prepared this document like this for a very good reason, which you are about to see. So with this template, you need to come back to your text document and select the first line of text. Press Command C to copy, then come back into Photoshop, press T on the keyboard to activate your text tool, select the first line of text in the first column. With this selected, press Command V to paste. So now I've pasted in the first line of text from my Word doc into the first text layer in the Photoshop doc. A quick way to get out of this text layer is to press and hold Command D and press Enter. This will exit the text layer, enabling you to move on to the next. So back in the text doc, I need to select the next line, and back into Photoshop, select and highlight the next text line and paste. Press and hold Command D and press Enter to exit the text layer, back into the Word doc, copy the next text line, back into Photoshop, select and highlight the next text line and paste. So by now you get the general idea. So I'm going to proceed with this until I have pasted all my text lines into my Photoshop document like so. Something to keep in mind here, I have prepared 3 columns of text for you. Whatever text you use, try and break it up into 3 sections. Fortunately for me, there is enough text layers for me, but if you find yourself using more, simply duplicate a text group to add more text, or add more text layers to your groups. After a little while, you should soon have all your text pasted into Photoshop, and you will have multiple layers with your text segments prepared like so. Excellent. So in my example, I have 3 song lyrics, each in their own group folder. Now it's time to turn to your fonts. At this stage, it will help if you have your character control panel open. If you do not have this open, you can come to the top menu and click Window and select Character from the list. So pull up a window where you can clearly see your fonts in a folder. I have mine set to a list like so, and make sure you have your written font list ready. Now I'm going to work from the top down in my Photoshop document and change each text layer to one of my chosen fonts. To make this process easier, I will be referencing my fonts folder and referencing my written fonts list, so I can easily see the names of all the fonts I wish to use. and then come into Photoshop and change the font accordingly. I can do this by using the text tool to select the text, and in the control panel at the top, I can begin to type the name of the font into the font browser, and it should recognize the font in the list and pull it up for me. Or I could do the same here in the character panel. Once your text is changed, it will be still selected. Press and hold Command D, then press Enter to exit the text quickly and move on to the next. So now you can see why keeping all the fonts in a single folder and writing a list will help you. Now, as you change the font from Arial to your new font, you may also need to tweak the font size so as to keep them all of similar size for now. So after a little while, the text in your Photoshop document will all be customized and complete with their own font. And you will have something that looks like this. So that completes the preparation stage. Once you have your text prepared, it's then time to move on to the next stage. Stage 2, create a type guide. What I'm going to do now is take my source image, as you can see here on the left, and make this into a type guide, as you can see here on the right. This guide will be used to structure and position all the type later on in the process. It's this guide that will help achieve a good composition that resembles the subject. So here I am in Adobe Photoshop, and I have my image open ready to modify. The first thing I'm going to do is change the image to grayscale. I can do this by coming up to Image, scrolling down to Mode, and selecting Grayscale. Then I'm going to press Command A to select all, then press Command C to copy. Once I have copied the image, I'm going to press Command W to close the document, as I no longer need this. Now I'm going to create a new document. I'm going to come to File, New, and I'm going to set the dimensions to 2000 by 2285 pixels. And I'm going to set the resolution to 150 dpi. So now I have a fairly good size canvas to work on. Next, I'm going to press Command V, and I will paste my grayscale image from the previous document into my new document. Then I'm going to rename the new layer to Type Base. Now, depending on the size of your image, whether it's too big or too small, press Command T to free transform and scale the image up or down to fit nicely in the center of the canvas like so. So now what I need to do is separate the face from the background. I don't need the background, and I only want the detail of the face and perhaps some of the area around the shoulders here. I'm going to select the type base layer I have just pasted in and add a layer mask. To do this, I can come to the bottom of the layers panel and click the third icon from the left. And upon click, I can see a new mask thumbnail has appeared next to the image thumbnail in the layers panel. So now I need to make sure I have the mask thumbnail icon selected in the layers panel here on the right and not the image thumbnail. I'm then going to select the brush tool and make sure my foreground color is set to black, and I'm going to choose a gritty brush. I'm going to change the opacity to about 50% up here in the control panel, and I'm going to start to draw onto the mask layer and begin to click and mask away the background part of the image. Now, I'm using a gritty brush so I can get a more jagged outline around the hair, combing out the background like so. Don't worry too much about getting this perfect, just make sure to get a fairly good cutout of your subject. After a little while, you should end up with something that looks like this. So using the mask layer, I have removed the background. Okay, so now I have a good portrait base. Next, I'm going to make some modifications to create more contrast in the image. So with the type base layer selected, I'm going to come down to the bottom of my layers panel and click the Add Adjustment Layer icon, fourth from the left. When the menu pops up, I'm going to select Levels. Upon click, the Adjustment Layer panel will appear. Now, depending on the nature of your image, you may need to toggle your levels more or less than I do. So I'm going to go ahead and tweak the levels. And I want to create some nice contrast here in the face. and push out the grey colours and try and emphasise the main features of the face, such as the eyes, nose and the hairstyle. So as you can see here, I have kept just a little texture around the nose and cheeks. Do try and keep some of this in yours as well, as this will help later on. So now in the Layers panel, I have the type base layer with an adjustment layer applied. To finish off this stage, I need to select the adjustment layer and hold down Shift on the keyboard and select the layer below, and press Command G to group them together, and I'm going to rename the group to Type Base. Now I have a single layer in the Layers panel with my type base inside. Once you have something that looks like this, and you have organized your layer folder, be sure to save the document into your work folder. And I'm going to call this Type Portrait. So with that, it's time to move on to the next stage. Stage 3, Type Positioning. So now we have prepared our type guide, it's now time to start working with the type and positioning the type around the face. Now this stage can be a little tricky, so to help you, you can open up the Type Layout Reference Guide. You can find this in the downloadable project folder. In this, you should see a high-resolution version where you can study how I place the type, which should give you an idea of how to position your type. So back into my main comp, before I begin, I need to change the opacity of the type base group to about 70%. This will lighten the image, so when I bring in my type, I'll be able to see the type clearly on top with the guide behind. I will also need to open my character panel. If you cannot see this, you can come to Window and select the character panel from here. I will be using this along the way to change the fonts and add boldness. Now, I need to open up my text document that I prepared earlier, and as you can see, I have 3 columns of text, and each column is contained in its own group. And we can see this if I select the group on the Layers panel, and I can move it around like so. So with the first column selected, I'm simply going to click and drag this into my main comp tab, and drop it in like so. So I'm going to move it over to the left hand side for now and zoom in a little so I can see what I am about to do. Right then, so here comes the tricky part. Now I'm going to start to position my type on the face. An easy way to do this is to place your mouse cursor over a particular text layer, and if you right click, you can see the layer appear in the pop-up menu. By selecting the appropriate layer, you can now click and move this into place like so. So I'm going to make a start from the top and in the middle and begin to make my way down the face and over to the left. So I'm going to move my mouse cursor over the next text layer, right click and select this. Then I'm going to move this layer over and under the previous text like so. But that is looking a little big, so I'm going to press Command T to pull up Free Transform, and by holding Shift I'm going to click and drag the bottom right pointer in like so, just to scale this down nicely a little. I can press Enter to release this, and this time use the arrow keys on the keyboard to finally place the text layer. If I press and hold the spacebar on the keyboard, I can click and drag to move across my document, where I can right click and select the next text layer. And I'm going to move that into place. Again, perhaps press Command T to activate Free Transform, scale that down a little, and press Enter to release and reposition. Now that is all I'm going to do for the next 20 minutes or so. Right clicking on my text layers to choose the layer I want real quick, and move them into position, and using Command T if I need to scale the text up or down. Now as you can see, I'm making progress down the side of the head here, and I am making sure to stay true to the inside hairline, staying close to the features as this will make for a more accurate resemblance later on. Now what I have chosen to do here is use a single word to break up the type and also give emphasis. Now, if it occurs to you that I am now beginning to break up the type and now it will no longer read or perhaps make sense, then don't worry too much about this. The type does not necessarily have to read exactly. After all, it's a creative piece, and it will become more abstract and interesting this way. Now, it's totally up to you how you compose your type. You can see I have pushed my type slightly over the outside hairline here. I think that's looking pretty interesting and breaks up the text, creating a jagged hair outline. So here I have a type composition going down the left side of the face, and I have been rather careful to stay as close to the inside hairline as possible. We can see I have another single word enlarged here, and that is looking quite interesting. So I'm now going to continue down to fill this section below. And here it is, and you can see I'm getting a little bit more playful now with some of the type and enlarging some of the words. If by this stage you are running out of type to work with, you can copy some of the type from above. To do this real quick, you can right-click on the text layer by selecting it. By pressing and holding Alt on the keyboard, you can click and drag. That will duplicate the text layer, and you can move that into place. If you do this, I recommend you also change the font size and the typeface to mix it up a little so it does not look so duplicated. Though if you still have plenty of type left, continue to use what you have. Right, so that completes the left side of the face. So back into my earlier prepared text doc, I am now going to select the second column and drag this into my main doc like so. Now I'm going to use this type for the beard and some of the detail around the eyes, so I can press Command T to free transform the entire group and scale the text down slightly. Now this will save me having to scale down every single text layer later on, so this may save me a little time. Okay, so just like earlier, I'm going to move this text off to one side and start to select the type layers and position them. I'm going to right click on the type layer to select it, and I'm going to move the type into position and scale down and move it around accordingly. And I'm going to focus on the beard here. After a little while, I will have a type composition that looks like this. And again, you can see I have played with the size and made some type elements bigger than others. As you can see, some text layers have been made really small just to capture some of the detail there. So next I'm going to move on to the mustache and mouth area. And as you can see, I have placed in lots of small type here. Keep in mind not to overlap the text too much. I have paid particular attention to the mouth area, and you can see I have squeezed in some text into the dark areas like so. So if I come up, I'm now going to place some text into the eyes. And as you can see, I have tried hard to capture some of the detail here, filling in the eyes and placing some small segments of type along the eyelids. And on the eyebrows, I have placed in some bold words to fill the space and some small type around it. To give the type a boost, I have selected the type and clicked the bold button here in the character panel. To deselect the type, I'm going to press and hold Command D and press Enter. So now all that's left to do is position more text on the right hand side. I'm going to come back to my text doc I prepared earlier, and I'm going to select the third column and again drag this into my main composition. I'm going to move this over to the right and begin from the top down and position my text like so. So after a little while of positioning your text, you will have something that looks like this. Now before I move on, I'm going to spend a little time going around my composition and fine-tuning some of my type positioning. Just like earlier, I can right-click over my type layer to select them, then tweak with the arrow keys to fine-tune the positioning, and if I feel the text is a little weak, I can select the type and apply boldness by clicking the bold button in the character panel. So once you are more or less happy with your type, it's now time to turn to the type base below, the type base group. But before that, I'm quickly going to select the top text group, press and hold Shift and select the bottom text group. With them selected, I'm going to press Command G to group these text groups into one folder, and I'm going to name this folder Type. So if I toggle the visibility of the type base group, you can see the layout of the type. And it's looking okay, but it needs something. It needs something else to reinforce the persona of the subject and make it more clear. So now I'm going to focus on the type base and tweak the type base layer mask to mask away more of the face but leaving behind some subtle texture to complement the type. You can see here in this example the result I want to achieve. And I can toggle the visibility of the text. You can see the type base is very faint, but still evident. Keep in mind, you want the type to work harder than the base texture. After all, this is a typographic portrait. Okay, so to do this, I'm going to continue to modify the mask that is already applied to the type base layer here in the Layers panel. Now I'm going to choose a gritty brush, make sure the foreground color is set to black, and in the control panel I'm going to change the opacity to 15%. And now I'm going to click on the mask layer and start to mask away parts of the type base layer. Now, due to the opacity being 15% of my brush, this will enable me to gradually mask out the type base and fade it out slightly. This will add to a more gradual blend between the type and the base layer. If at any point you decide you have removed too much of the type base, you can simply change the brush color to white and click to mask some of the type base back in. Soon you should end up with something that looks like this. Now you can see I have removed a lot of the hair around the face and beard, making the type more prominent. On the face, I have kept some texture around the forehead, eyes and nose area. Around the shoulders, I have blended that out quite nicely, just leaving some of the texture to carry the type. So once you are happy with the type layer and your type base, it's now time to move on to the final stage. Stage 4, Color Blend. So by now, you should be happy with your type layout and your type base. Now I'm going to take this composition and add some color. To begin, I'm going to come to the Layers panel and I'm going to select the Type group. I'm going to hold Shift and select the Type Base group. Next, I'm going to press Command G and group these together into a single folder. And I'm going to rename this folder to Original Comp Backup. So this folder now contains all the elements that create this composition. Next, I'm going to right-click on the Original Comp Backup group, right-click and duplicate. And this time I'm going to call this group Type Mask. So with the new group created, on the top of the Layers panel, I'm going to press Command E to merge the group into a single layer. So now we have the group below and the single layer above. Now I'm going to toggle the visibility of the Original Comp Backup group because we no longer need this. This is no longer going to play a part in the artwork. This is simply going to be a backup of the process that got us to this point. So all the work we have done up until this point has been to create this flat single mask layer, which is the most important part of the artwork. Okay, so we have this single layer, but let me quickly point something out to you. If I make a new layer below my mask layer, and let's fill this in red, we can see that the single layer is in fact transparent. Now at this point, we do not want this. We want this to be on a flat white background. So I'm going to make a new layer by pressing Command Shift N, and I'm going to fill this layer in white. I'm going to move this layer below my mask layer. I'm going to click on the mask layer and press Command E to merge the two layers together. And I'm going to rename the layer to Type Mask. So now there is no transparency and we have the type composition on a solid white background. Excellent. So now comes the magic. So navigate to your image folder and open up your color image. I'm going to press Command A to select all, press Command C to copy, and then press Command W to close down the document. In my main comp, I'm going to press Command V to paste, and now I have the color layer pasted on top. And I'm going to rename this layer to color. For now, I'm going to toggle the visibility of this color layer, as I need to see my type mask below. So I'm going to select the type mask layer and press Command I. This is now going to invert my type mask layer, like so. Next, I'm going to press Command A to select all, and then press Command C to copy. Then I'm going to toggle the visibility as I no longer need to see this layer. Next, I'm going to toggle the visibility back of my color layer and make sure I have the layer selected. Now I'm going to apply an opacity mask layer to this layer. To do this, I'm going to come to the bottom of the Layers panel and click the Add Layer Mask button, third from the left. And upon click, we can now see a new mask thumbnail appear on the color layer in the Layers panel. So now I'm going to press and hold Alt on the keyboard, and this is important. With Alt held on the keyboard, I'm going to click on the new mask thumbnail. Upon click, everything should turn white. What I can now see is my editable mask area. Remember, with masks, whatever is black is hidden and whatever is white is revealed. So I inverted my mask just moments ago. So now I'm going to paste this into my mask layer here. So go ahead and press Command V to paste, and there is my mask image. Now then, are you ready for the magic? Click back onto the color layer and bingo, there it is. So I used the black and white typographic portrait with the grey texture to create a mask. If I zoom in, I can see the colour creeping through the texture in the face. So that's looking great, but I would like it to be more bolder and richer. A simple way to do this is to come to the Layers panel, right-click on the colour layer and select Duplicate. And that's looking more rich. Though if I want to make it more bolder still, I can duplicate the layer once again. So now I have 3 color layers in the Layers panel. Now, if I want to make it even more richer, you could duplicate the layer again and add a blending mode of multiply up here in the top left of the Layers panel. Now, that's looking pretty cool, eh? Though, if you think it's maybe perhaps a bit too much, you can tone this down a little by toggling the transparency of your top color layer. I'm going to toggle this and make this 60%. So I'm going to select all the new color layers and group these together and call this new folder Type Portrait. Okay, almost done. To finish off the artwork, I'm going to come to the Image folder and open up the canvas texture. I'm going to press Command A to select all, Command C to copy, and Command W to close the document. Then, in my main comp, I'm going to press Command V to paste this in. I'm then going to add a blending mode of multiply, and that's looking pretty dark, so I'm going to change the opacity to 45%. I'm going to create a new layer by pressing Command-Shift-N. Then, with the Color Picker tool, I'm going to select a green color and make sure my background color is set to white. Then, with the Gradient tool, by clicking and holding on the Paint Bucket tool and selecting the Gradient tool, I'm just going to draw from the top left down to the bottom right. I'm going to change the opacity to 40% and add a layer blending mode of multiply. This is just going to add a subtle shade to the canvas. Now, you don't need to do this, but this is just something I've chosen to do just to add a little bit of colour. With these 2 new layers, I'm going to select them both in the Layers panel and press Command G to group them. And I'm going to rename this group to Texture. Next, with the group selected, I'm going to add a layer mask. And with a gritty brush set to an opacity of 50%, I'm going to mask away the face to highlight some of the areas, such as around the forehead, cheeks, and nose, just to add to the overall effect. And that finishes the typographic portrait. So that's how you can create a typographic portrait in Adobe Photoshop. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial. If you liked the tutorial, hit the like button on my Facebook page and even add me as a friend. Always willing to chat to you guys and answer any questions you may have. Don't forget you can download the documents you saw in this tutorial. All links are in the description. If you guys have a go at this yourself, be sure to come and paste it up on my Facebook wall. I'd love to see what you guys can come up with. Well, that's it for another video brought to you by tastytuts.com. Thanks for watching, have fun guys, and I'll see you next time.